Hello everybody, welcome to my oil painting class, and today we are looking at some fabulous mountains, Spanish mountains, and Guadalest Monastery. And the aim of the session today is, well, one of the aims is how do we, if we pick up an image, so for example, my photograph is quite dull and grayish and a little bit boring. I quite like the composition of things, but I'm not too sure about the colors. It didn't come out on the photograph of how things were and or how I wanted to depict it. However, I have got a photograph of an artist's work, of Inga Popovska's work. Some of you might have worked with some of her style with me before in the past. But I love how she intensifies the color, some of these gorgeous purples and violets and turquoisey blues and ultramarines and some beautiful autumny kind of yellowy greens. So I'm interested into that color scheme and how we can translate it, or how we can help ourselves to encourage color and encourage our interpretation of the more boring grayish image. Okay, and obviously I also want to work into, there are loads of details in our photograph today, there are loads of plants, there are loads of rocks, there are loads of buildings, there are loads of all sorts of things. Well, how we can do it more spontaneously, a bit more loosely, and have a nice playful kind of approach to the painting. So that's one of the things there. So I have a wide surface today. It could be a board or paper or canvas. So we can build up some of the layers a little bit loosely as well. Okay, again, following some of the techniques of Inga Popovska here. Right, so I have from my palette, I have some paints already squeezed out. So I've got some white, ochre, magenta, or cadmium, or crimson. You could have had crimson, violet, cobalt blue, bluey gray, ultramarine, and I've got a couple of greens, olive green, kind of more yellowish green for me, and emerald green. And I also have some Payne's gray, or it could have been some black. Okay. Right, and I'd like us to get started with a composition. So we're going to sketch our composition first, and then we'll work into colors and we'll build the tones. Now, because we're going to start exaggerating the colors a little bit more, I want us to go and use a little bit of white for our sketchy color, ultramarine, and a little bit of Payne's gray. So we're looking for some sort of indigo, lightish, medium-ish blue. Okay. So something like that. So when that color will run or mix with other colors later on for us, it will be part of our piece. So if I were to look at the whole layout of our Spanish beautiful valley, we have tiny bit of a line, tiny bit of a belt of a line of the sky left. So let's start with that. Let's just have a few dips ins and out of the tops of these mountains. Okay, maybe a bit more simplified on the top, a little bit more, maybe dips in and out on the left and on the right. I have a very dramatic diagonal going down from one of those mountains, and it gives me an idea of kind of how part of this composition is going to be coming in. And we've got another diagonal coming down almost where the trees and the outline of the village on the rock. So we almost got that entrance point from the bottom here Yeah, and then we've got that mountain, and then there is another ridge, little valley, how things are moving down, little steps. There is a little woodland here. And then again, it brings us to the Guadalest rocks. It's almost like a back of dragon. Okay, something there. So we've got that circle, we've got that spiral immediately coming in to us. So all of these ones will just roughly be somewhere here. And then I can just put my village. So that's how instead of looking, oh, where the houses are, where this one, yeah. So I found one immediate line from the mountains, or I could have started from the bottom for the trees and the village. And yes, my trees will be finishing a little bit more here, but they're almost like entering here quite dramatically at the front. Okay, and then we can work into the shapes of the rough shape of the buildings as a whole, as a group. Okay, if we'll have some trees standing out and doing a few. Okay, it's reflecting here quite a bit. Let's see if I can just turn it. No, that's still reflecting. Okay, just for the moment while we're drawing. Right, so now we've got some of the basic shapes. Let's pick up a larger brush and let's bring some color in. Now, if I were to look at our inspirational artist work, she has loads of blocks of color introduced first. So I'd like to bring some of the pinky, violety, purpley colors, and maybe some ultramarines, not ultramarine, sorry, kind of turquoisey blues, turquoisey, fresh blues, yeah, maybe a little bit of fresh, well, ultramarine as well. So let's give that one a go. Now we'll be using a little bit more softer colors first, softer paints, diluted paints. So I'll have a tiny bit of white, a little bit of extra oil. There's my oil. Okay. And some of my magenta. If you're using crimson, just add a dab of violet to it to have some softness, to have a bit more less red, but a little bit more purple feel for it. Okay. And what I'll be looking now, I'll be looking for some of the highlights of the exposed rock on the mountains at the back. And if there are any hints of warmth in it, that's where I'm going to put it. So, and sometimes it might be more improvised than the exact actual color we'll see. I need a little bit of white in it, so it's not going to be too transparent. Transparency is good, softness of it is good. So we're going to draw almost like with shape some of the highlights on those big exposed sections of rock. Okay. And there's some of those. So we can identify some of those areas. Slightly bigger, that's okay, because we can simplify them afterwards. And there's some big shapes of them. We could have sketched them, with our initial color with a thinner brush, but I think seeing them as shapes is probably better. And if we do change the color, for example, I'm running out of my initial color, I might just add a dab of violet to my much more fresher magenta. So it slightly changes. So we're not just painting, well, I'm picking up some of the lighter shapes on the within the mountains, but it doesn't mean that our color has to stay light. We can work with the light itself afterwards. I'm more interested into color for the moment. But it's easier to identify shapes when they, let's say, lighter and darker. Okay, there's something. Supporting that somewhere there. And I think coming close to our rocks next to the village, I want to intensify my violet, but I'll add a bit more extra white to it, so it will be less pinky but more violety. Have to stay really brave and really excited about our colors. So all that rock here, I'm going to block in with some violet, with white. So it's soft paint. It's in places it's a little bit more runny and a little bit transparent, but most importantly, as long as it's flat layer. Okay, it's a little bit harder to see in this bottom corner here, but okay, let's see if I'll drop it a little lower. So now I'm going to add a little bit more white to my brush. I've got still the same big white brush. I haven't washed my brush. I just wiped the major bulk of paint of it. And it's quite a soft big brush as well. And I'm going to use my cobalt blue. Has a lot of very turquoisey qualities to it, and a small dab of emerald green to have that a little bit more turquoisey feel. Okay, a little bit of white. And let's use it for parts of our sky. For now, I think I'm just going to block all my sky with that color, and I'm going to make some differences. So I think my sky could be in that color. Okay. And what I can add to the skies, if I mix extra white to it. On the photograph, the sky is quite plain. There is not much clouds. There's not much differentiation of things, but we don't want to have a solid same line, no matter how beautiful it is. Might just make a slight changes. So I'm just adding a little bit of extra paler tone, a couple of corners. And maybe when I start using some blue, maybe I'll bring a little bit of blue to it as well. A bit more fresher blue. So, and now I'm back to my cobalt blue. I'm going to plan a little bit of that cobalt blue, a couple of other areas. Now I want to use cobalt blue. If there's still a small hint of emerald green, that's brilliant. Maybe a tiny bit more darker tone of the sky version. I want to use it almost as parts of the horizontal strokes, maybe over my violets, almost like to show there's some surface coverage there, yeah? So I'm almost highlighting the direction of some of those vegetation there. Yeah, so I just wanted to maybe just somewhere a little bit more on the side, a bit wider. So somewhere on the tops. If that blue is mixing with our violets, that's fine. Now, if Inga Popovska has been working with kind of top parts of the landscape of kind of Nordic part of the country, yeah, of the northern countries. We've got loads of pine trees. Here we've got similar darkness, but from maybe olive trees or other trees. There will be some pine trees in the backdrop somewhere here as well. So that darkness comes a slightly different way, but it's still there. Okay, so maybe some of the blue, that beautiful fresh blue, is going to be somewhere here. And then we're building up some of the ridges. I have quite a lot of repetitive strokes for the moment, but I'm building things up, so I'm not too worried about that yet. If I'll see loads of the similar length strokes to the later stages, that's when I'll need to deal with them. Now, behind here on the left, behind my monastery rocks, I'm going to put that blue color as well, because monastery here in this corner will have some shadows. So if I'll put a medium tone, that's beautiful. Blue will work here as well. Okay, there will be loads of darker blues at the front. So if I'll just maybe put a tiny bit of that color here to remind me to cool things off, that will be good as well. Excellent. So having loads of white left today is quite good to see the freshness of things, to see the freshness of the surface, how things are building up. And as I still have my blue, I'll go for a slightly darker version of it now, mainly cobalt blue and less white. See if we can add some of that color in a couple of areas as well. And now I'll be looking for some of the dark corners of the valleys. So before I go to super dark ultramarines and indigos, I want to bring some color. So I'm going to go for some of the valleys, corners. Okay. There's another little development. Again, some of my, so all those ridges, well, the dips within the mountains, they're of a similar size and of a similar width at the moment. I will need to pay attention to them later, so they're not going to remain the same. Maybe I'll smudge some of them, maybe I'll play with extra darkness, maybe something else needs to be done. So at least I'm starting to pay attention like that. Even already is a bit different to making it one wider than another. Okay, and maybe some more of that blue to come on the valley here, on the right. So totally different colors from the gray, boring photograph. Right, I want it all being super lovely blue here. I want some other darks here. So let's just leave it there for now. Right, now I'm going to pick up a medium brush so I can mix some darker tones and start emphasizing some of the contrasts. I'm going to dot it about. I'll start with a fresh ultramarine. I'm going to keep the paint quite diluted. Another option is to have a very rough brush, so that will give you quite a lot of texture from when you start placing some of the strokes. So for example, if I were to put it on top of my ridge, okay, I can't see much of it, so I need some Payne's gray with my ultramarine. Okay, maybe some fresh ultramarine with a bit of white will come in later then. So let's start with more darker tone. Okay, so let's do a little textures on the top of my cliffs here. Now, it's okay for them to be a bit more bulkier than we want them to be. A little bit more playful, a little bit more scratchy. We can even put some of the extra darks on some of the ridges. Okay, maybe some of those trees will be coming up here. Some nice shadows. So this is just the beginning of our contrasts for the key areas, yeah, of our monastery here. So some of the monastery is going to be on the top here, and a couple of tops, and then the village is just next to it. I can also help myself with one of the wooden wedges, which is here for me, or a palette knife is good as well. So we can do a little bit of scratching. Okay, my wooden wedge escaping me. There we go. So I could just lift some of this, or just scratch some of this, or maybe just scratch some of these ridges, create an extra lines or textures. If I don't like something, let's say that's too similar or too much, I can just spread that color with my finger or with a brush. They're too similar in size, so it's something to play with and explore a little bit, or maybe just to direct scratch some of those shadows we've done. So maybe I will bring my brush back to certain areas. Perfect time to do those explorations now before we've done anything else complex. So maybe I'll scratch some of my monastery buildings, although I can still put highlights and paint. It just gives me a bit more planning time. It's quite nice. A bit of scratching if we wanted to, almost as with sketching. Quite like that. That's quite working for me. Now, if something doesn't work for you, it doesn't mean that you have to do it. Okay, this is just one of the options to create that texture, to create that mark making. You can try using a piece of card or even the back of the brush or anything like a palette knife. Yeah, so I can use the edge of the palette knife and just do a little bit of similar scratching widthwise, or creating some extra lines. So stay creative, stay a bit bold with some of these marks. So that's our little starting point of introducing the darks, but we don't want them to be overly solid. Can put that, we can add that solidness later, kind of that combination of something between solid and exciting, bold, and it's interacting with our image. So what I didn't want, I think that part of the scratching came in because I didn't want that top line to be the same width, the same kind of quality. It started being a little bit more part of the rock or part of the background. Just making that again so it doesn't look like a similar width outline. It's more of a shape here on the left. Fantastic. And then we can bring this again a little bit more thicker ultramarine, ultramarine and Payne's grey, and let's just add it in a few places in our backdrop of the mountains. So maybe watch me for a couple of strokes, how free I'm going to try to introduce them and maybe smudge them a little bit, and then join me in. So if I'm doing a little mark and I can stop, can I just drag it? I'm holding it with my brush really far at the end, so I'm not overly precise where I'm placing it. Is it partially smudged? Is it partially interacted? Is it partially, yeah? Can I do a little bit of trees dotting because this is a nice dark shadow crevasse? Yeah, see if we can do that one. If it's too much, we can use our, again, maybe wooden wedge to help it to be interacted within that landscape. And I'll probably stay with my most dark tones in the center of the painting and be more gentle with them on the left and on the right. We'll see. It feels that should do kind of keep our focus more in the center, but until we actually place it, I wouldn't know for definite. It'd be nice to put some trees at the top of the mountain here. They're quite small, but that's made it quite distinctive. Some of these one might do something similar, but maybe a little bit lighter. They're less central and less important for us. Quite like that. So I just dab the brush. Some more of them. That's exciting, yes. And maybe those type of dark lines will help us out to create those rounder shapes within the mountains. So we're suggesting some sort of terrain. We're suggesting how the trees are clinging to the cliffs. And I'm constantly looking back, stepping away, leaning back in my chair, so to look how the whole painting looks. Will some of these maybe exciting strokes start competing with each other, being too similar, or are they balancing each other out, or what's happening? Yeah. Okay, quite like these ones, but I'm seeing a silly face now in my mountains, so I need to get rid of that somehow. Okay, that's a bit better. And maybe some extra dark, so come here. Want to bring, yeah, our entrance point here, and then bringing it towards. Maybe more blue here. Maybe I can offset my foreground rocks. So I already distinguished those rocks with some scratching. They're slightly different in color than some of the pinks at the back. And now they will be having a nice contrast corner on the right as well. Okay, all of these lines looks too similar. Let's break them down a little. Let's bring some of this to a V shape. I know we'll have some lovely darks at the front as well. So that's what's still to come. Just put one of them. I think I might. I'd prefer if I would have put my lighter tones in the foreground first, but if I'll just put a little bit of my dark just to balance it first. Just to give me an idea of how some of the dark will follow. Okay. Makes me a little bit more happy with that. So some of our darks are coming through now. Now another color we can see in our inspirational artist work today is that lovely green, which is mixed from excuse me, ochre and greens, ochre and some of the reds, ochre and some violets. So I want to introduce it as part of our Spanish landscape as well, to bring some warmth. So we've got loads of cool pinks and cool blues, so let's bring a little bit of warmth to it as well. So I'm going to have some oil on my palette. Let's pick up some white and some olive green. Now my olive green sometimes appears quite yellowish on the screen. So let's bring a little bit more thicker version of it. If you don't have olive green, you can just use emerald green and mix it with some ochre and quite a bit of white. So I'm doing the same thing now. That will have just give me a slightly darker version of that olive green. Olive green comes out very, very light. So I think that's a bit better. And a bit more ochre for me. And I want to use this color as a little trial at the bottom here for my foreground. I'm going to just try to fill some of the gaps between some of the dark tones I've done or some of the colors I've placed already, just to see what that color is going to start looking like. Close. We're still doing some color experiments and color playfulness, color kind of placements. We haven't overly attached them to specific objects. They're more color shapes. Quite like that. And I can slightly change it by adding a bit more magenta or cadmium, sorry, or crimson to it. That's got that lovely warmth to it as well. A bit more orangey look. So again, I'll just continue. So it's not the same green on the foreground then. This is quite thick paint now. It still hasn't got a lot of relief in it, but it's much thicker than the previous layers because we're working on the foreground and we already have some of the colors in front of us. I think I love that warmth. Might just increase a little bit even more of that. And add it at the back of my hills, you know, where we've got some of the lights left. Now, so far our whites, what we've left out, work as highlights, but they're not going to be full on. Might just have a tiny bit of white with it. Okay, that's quite a lot. Let's place it here. See, no, that's okay. Excuse me. So I can fill my gaps now. We're going to create our true highlights in the mountains. So far we just left whites as we were progressing. So that will be a nice contrast. I'm a little bit working into the silhouette of the cliffs, but I'm not overly paying too much attention to it. I'm more interested to place the color for the backdrop for these monastery cliffs. I'm more interested to get rid of the whites and seeing how the whole image works. Okay, or maybe where this could be edited. Okay, how that could be translated. Okay, maybe the same color could come a bit more here at the back. The higher I'm gonna go, probably the lighter and more fresher yellowy green. I'm gonna go kind of ochre green. I haven't got any yellow on my palette, so by the time we mix ochre and the green, olive green, that will give us that not just lighter but also a little bit more yellowish color. So filling all my gaps and stepping away. I'm seeing some of these greens are working well, but the shapes of them for me are looking not as pleasant as I would have wanted to. So now I'm going to introduce, for example, the tops. I've got two similar 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 same marks, just different directions, but they're the same in size and everything. So maybe I can work into that a little. So I can paint over my pinks, touch up over my blues, just to have that green settling. Maybe connect it with another hill. I still want my pinks to stay fresh. So if parts of them are smudged, that's okay. The rest of them will stay fresh. So I'm going and again introducing some more greens into any other white gaps we might have had. And I think that the redder, darker browny green at the bottom of the valley looks really exciting. I think I might get rid of this pink and place that reddish green here. I'm really enjoying that green here. Let's do a dab of violet with emerald green. Let's see a couple of strokes here. We'll give it a little bit of extra weight. Exciting, yes. So I'm just adding tiny bit of strokes here and there just to see how they changing, but do kind of changing the environment, but I do like seeing the fresh blues at the back. I love seeing the fresh pinks being preserved in as many areas possible. But my sub-green is getting about now. I have a lot of dark corners here, but there are loads of things going on, loads of patchiness, because I haven't quite made a final decision of how, well, it's need to stay simple, but I think some of them darker tones will still have to come and simplify that area. Okay. Right, the reason I haven't finished my greens at the low left corner, I've been thinking of putting them quite light green, but now I've covered the rest of the whites. I'm keeping some of the whites for the houses. So now I'm looking at this corner, and I think the red and olive green, or the magenta and olive green, will work well here. More fresher. It's quite a nice combination. Can even go for much stronger magenta. If you're using crimson, just keep adding a dab of violet to it. So just using that stronger color might hide a couple of pinks, or maybe just to introduce them for part of them. Some of the trees growing on the rocks here, so maybe just a small amount of it. It's quite nice to combine the scratchy strokes, quite runny strokes were applied with much thicker layers. You know, those might be my rooftops as well. Quite like that color for the rooftops. I think that might be working as well. The kind of part of the landscape, are they all rooftops? Are they part of the trees there? Are they part of the walls? Are they part of the squares? You can add more fresh color to it at the later stage, but it's almost like looking for a little bit of a rhythm of how much white is going to be left or how it's going to be spread a bit more. That's good, I like that. Okay, maybe some silly windows. They might get smudged later on. So that's why I'm not too worried about applying them quite widely. Again, I'm looking for that rhythm. Okay, it's a bit more busy on one side and it's a little bit more spread out, or a little bit more individual dots. I think that's will be quite nice. And then it's time to do a little bit of evaluations. So while you're painting, I'm going to do a little bit of talking and a little bit of planning for the next few steps. So really excited about the colors. Really like how the foreground comes out in comparison to the backdrops. There's still a lot of emphasis need to happen at the front with the darker tones, so we can introduce it a little bit more careful with a smaller brush. We can start introducing some highlights on the mountains a bit more softly. Maybe there will be those paler pinks, maybe there will be paler blues, maybe we'll be just introducing some fresher whites and seeing how they will be mixing with the colors. And then need to compare our sky. The sky looks good, fantastic, but now we've got all the colors. It's now a little bit lost. So, or we might need to make it slightly lighter in places, or maybe the opposite, emphasize it and make it extra darker. Maybe the mountains do need to stand out as a solid silhouette, and the sky will just have to be more softer. Or maybe we'll just do slightly darker edge for the mountains. So overall, we read them more as a silhouette, and the sky will pop up as we develop it. So a few things to go even before we start working into the details on the front. Okay. Right, so let's start with maybe making the top of our mountains tiny bit darker, and deciding on what we're doing with the sky, and then come back to our dark areas. So I'll go for my cobalt blue. So we were working with the cobalt blue. So if I were to start with that as a more pure color, maybe not adding much white to it. If you do add it from your previous palette colors, as I have, might not be overly dark. And let's just work into the kind of top line and integrate it with the current blues. Link it with some of the pinks, maybe bring a bit more of that blue over. Because the pinks are quite light and have quite a lot of white paint in them, you might need to keep topping up your brush with fresher color, fresher darkness of the blue for it to remain dark. So I'm using some strokes which are small little dots to a little bit more elongated ones. Some of them will merge and blend with the others. Some of them will stay more independent. Okay, don't like that light here, so maybe all of that light will go. Okay, now I'm a little bit at the danger of keeping very similar strokes. So that gives me an opportunity to maybe change the direction of them. Maybe combine them with others, maybe blend some of them. Now, what I also ended up having is two shapes of the mountain, which are a little bit similar. Now, they're similar in the widths, kind of at the top. One is getting narrower, one is getting wider. Yes, they're different there. But in this section, they're a little bit similar in their widths. So maybe I need to bring something which will change that dynamics. For example, I think some of my pinks here might need to go into more violets. So if I'll go for some violet and white. So if I don't work with my cobalt blue, I can also work with other medium tones. That's quite exciting. I like that. Okay, that's much more calmer now. Let's also make me want to add a little bit of that violet to this medium segment of a mountain. I think some of those highlight pinks will go better. Partially hidden. Okay, that's good. Not as jumpy anymore. And also when we want a little bit of true highlights, it will be easier for us to introduce them. I think some of this pink could partially disappear as well. That doesn't mean that we wasted our time painting pink. The pink is still present then, in some corners is visible. So that's more important for us. And also, by the time we were applying that violet, it was mixing with our pink as well, giving it an extra color. I think I might do a little bit of extra depth of that violet, maybe some under the trees or some extra shadows. Not too much details, but it has given me an idea of that color integration a little further. So it's almost like, again, those, remember how we were doing the blues, just horizontal lines. So I'm doing that violet almost in a similar way, slightly darker violet version, just to kind of highlight or emphasize some of those ridges. And I keep coming back to my palette for fresh violet because my brush picks up the greens, it does pick up the blues, it does pick up all sorts of things. So to have that stronger, fresher color is better. And I think I can use a little bit of this color on my monastery rocks. Possibly even with a smaller brush, or there's quite a lot of light paint. So for me, just bring small volumes of it is enough. And I'm just following some of my scratchy strokes. As directions, or some helpful placements. So then this rock is not all the same in light. That's good. Another good technique with any of the lights or anywhere else you might want, because the paint is still wet, we have white background. Let's say if you wanted to lift something, clean your brush and just rubbing it in one area can flatten the color or can clean the color, so it will give you a cleaner background. Let's say if you wanted some light or if you wanted to remove a color from a specific area. So that gives a really good opportunity to kind of to carve the shapes for your choice. Okay, I'm happy with that. So loads of fine tuning now. Now let's, we said we're going to do some highlights and we're going to do some darks. And I think if we'll do some extra darks in the front, middle ground, and then some highlights, that will give us a bit more judgment on how much light we'll need to go for. Now, I really like the contrasts of the darks against the buildings here, that lovely green, that warmer redder green, and that dark tree. So I want to bring some more of those contrasts here. But I also want to see color. So if I were to go for fresh ultramarine without mixing it with anything, and introduce it as few strokes. I love the turquoise here. It looks like there's a pool of water or something else. I might just preserve it. I really like it. So if I were to bring some of that fresh ultramarine on the foreground, okay, it's mixing with my green and gives me much lighter color. But if I put it on my dark Payne's gray, that looks a bit better. So it's a nice chunk of blue. Okay, so I can do both. I can use possibly, right, so introducing fresh ultramarine is a good idea, but might be a little bit harder to do it well because color is mixing. But I think if I were to work with darker tone and then introduce it on top, I think that might be a little bit easier for me. Okay, let's give it a go. So Payne's gray and ultramarine together. More Rainier. If I were to use my ultramarine, I'll go quite solid, no oils. If I'm using Payne's gray and ultramarine, I will go with much more oil, so the black will be easier to introduce. It will be easier strokes to make. Dark will remain no matter how diluted, it will remain dark. Just mixing it well, so the ultramarine is mixing well there. Right, let's place a few trees here. A classic Mediterranean pine trees, which have some beautiful round shapes to them. And the classic, the Romans cut the lower branches, so they had long tree trunks and some beautiful round tops of the trees above their villas. Okay, so that's good. Okay, I quite like the diagonal coming through. Let's see how wide and narrow the diagonal might be. So again, I'm still building up my blacks, not just randomly filling things up. I am shaping it up with an existing colors, with an existing kind of shapes. I'm doing it a little bit at a time and seeing how they connect together. Okay, that's looking better. Now let's see. I need something darker close to the tree, to the white buildings. Yeah, I don't want all of them being just dark connected to the white buildings, but and I'm topping up my paint with blue because I'm painting on top of lighter greens and they make my paint much lighter. Also, they give a shade of green, just give it a shade of light to it as well, which is a bonus. That's good, I like that. Let's do something similar for the area. And this ridge, I want it to be simplified, but I still can't quite let go of my beautiful blues here. So I'll persevere till I see that blues are too much. Maybe they will remain as little gaps. Those valleys of the shadows are more important structurally here. So I'm not going to go for any green. If I do go for another color, it's ultramarine. Bringing some of the trees back. Deliberately kind of simplifying my colors. Even the trees looking very green. They will start fighting with my pinks and other introduced fresher blues. Okay, that's exciting, but would it be too bold and busy for the castle? Will it take too much attention from the castle? Okay, it's too maybe busy here. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to be brave and just going to kind of shade everything here in one shape of darkness. So I'm summarizing all of that together. Okay, so I think some of these are too bold for me as well. So just going over them, they mix with the previous green ochre and they're less strong. Okay, so I've got much more calmer area now. So I'll add a couple of strong dark strokes just to bring that kind of direction to the whole painting. Okay, and then I'll bring some lights. So for example, using some of those earlier greens. Okay, tiny bit more white. So I'll just bring the colors back in a smaller quantities, but much more muted. Well, they will be more muted because of the environment they're going to be in. Okay, that's a bit of light coming through. That's even more exciting. Again, that's my fixing approach. You might have your own challenges in this corner. If you like something you did earlier and it's worked for you, brilliant. You don't have to adjust anything. But this is something you might be just keep on painting and just look at the process I'm going through just as a practice for future kind of rescue operations. Okay, I quite like some of this warm green, but on its own it's not enough, so I'm going to be back to some of my pinks and violets. So I'm using magenta and violet a little bit thicker. Maybe just a couple of spots. Or shapes. Okay, that's a bit better. So I've got much more calmer corner of the darks when I've got loads of dazzling, yeah, moving about, quite bold, strong blacks here. Now I can come back to more darker shadow now around the cliffs for the castle, monastery, and even some darker blues for the trees, the ones I wanted to do earlier. So I need some more fresh ultramarine. And I'll use a smaller brush so I could place the fresh blue to a couple of my trees and leave it in big chunks of blue. If you have a very soft brush, you will struggle to leave the color. It will keep smudging and stain remaining on your bristles. So a hog brush or smaller size brush with shorter bristles will help you to do that. It gives a lovely coolness. It's reasonably big strokes as well. To show our foreground, to make it different from them. Scratches of the buildings or more smoother strokes at the back. Right, and I think I'm gonna go for ultramarine and violet together. Again, reasonably thick, maybe with a tiny drop of oil for my shadows on the left-hand side of my monastery cliffs. I want them to be a little bit more stronger. Again, I'm not looking into tiny crevasses and tiny little folds of darkness. I want to see them more silhouettes, more simplified, if needed, dotty or little short lines. And as you might see, I keep adding more fresh paint on the tip of my brush. If the paint keeps going to the root of your brush, keep wiping it and keep reloading your brush. I tend to have my root of the brush clean, if you can see it there, so it doesn't slide low enough. And then I just wiped it and I just continue again. So then I'm constantly working with a lot of fresh color. Okay, my darks are here as well. Maybe I'll emphasize a couple of strokes here as well. A couple of my buildings might want some pale blue shadows later on, once we've done some shadows on mountains. So nuances of shadows. Just fixing something I smudged earlier. Well done. Right, I'm ready for some highlights. I've got loads of white. I have my gray blue. So I think I'm going to start with a little bit of gray, blue and white for the sky and make a few strokes If you don't have blue-gray, just use cobalt blue and a tiny, 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 tiny dab of black just to make it less fresh blue. Let's just put a few strokes of our sky. To emphasize maybe that light. Now the sky has very oily surface here, so it's harder to place thicker strokes. So just persevere a little and you'll have some beautiful effects. So the green is remaining there. And then I'll go for a little bit more fresher white, again quite thick. It's too thick and unruly. Of course, use a little bit of oil. So my white is a little bit thick, so if I'll make a good paste out of it, which is more manageable to be applied, then I'll do a few highlights on my rocks. So I'm looking for the effect our inspirational artist did, where she placed some extra whites just to help the work to have stronger contrasts. So I'm going to look at some of those cliffs, a bit more emphasized on the corners here. Okay, maybe a little bit more there. So let's just bring a bit more. I'm going to go over some of my pinks. Almost like a wide stroke and kind of let go down exposed part of the rock and maybe just kind of vegetation creeping up, growing in it. Maybe part of it somewhere exposed here. Work with what you have on your surface of the painting. I think I might just expose some of the light here as well. Be careful that the colors from underneath might smudge. Kind of give that leeway to go over. Okay, let's have a look at this chunk of the rock. Now, I don't want to overdo this corner because I've got loads of lovely darks, and I think my existing pinks below are strong enough to create that highlight. I even think maybe this area was too much. So I can bring some of my medium tones back. Okay, let's step back. Don't think this one is overly successful stroke here as well. Let's bring it back to a medium tone. Okay, does it feel like we're missing anything there? Losing its being light? I don't think so. I think maybe smaller quantities here. So that's the advantage of oils to watercolors, where you can work and think at the same time with oils and place your colors and smudge them back or remove them and give it another go or have another try, or even with acrylic, because acrylic dries so quickly. So you have to make those decisions and stay with them. And oil stays so soft, it's quite nice to manipulate it. Still considering, okay, strokes competing here. I'm a little bit struggling to see the full picture in one go because of reflections. And the camera setting is in the same time. Okay, I think that's okay. I can do now a tiny bit of highlights on my monastery buildings using a smaller brush. And then we'll have a tiny bit of shadows on the buildings, the white buildings, and we're done. So if I use a tiny brush with some fresh white, where I've got some scratches for the monastery buildings, those little towers, I can just place a couple of strokes for fresh whites. So they will have a bit more flatter surfaces. If you're happy with your existing marks, you don't have to do anything. This is just something again, individual. I'm looking at my photograph, but I'm also looking what I have in front of me on my piece. And if I extended some buildings which doesn't actually exist in reality, that's okay, because it just worked for my colors. Then I think that will be quite nice as well. Just extending that volume maybe for the wall. So it does look like a number of towers just grouping, just climbing that mountain, which is fantastic. Right, and I said a bit of white and cobalt blue, a couple of shadows on the buildings for the village. I left loads of white, fresh white for them. If you ended up losing some of that white, it's totally fine. Don't be scared of introducing fresh white in. But I think leaving some fresh board white, canvas white, nothing wrong with it. If it's texture, its kind of surface, its appearance brings a variety to your painting, variety to your whites. Fantastic, why not? So again, I'll just do a small number of horizontal and vertical lines, or maybe a little emphasis on some of the windows. Just creative pattern of shadows. And if it's too much, again, I can stop. That's why I'll do a little bit at a time. But it probably will sharpen some of my darker brown shapes for the rooftops, or I might do some of those blue strokes under those brown lines. Only pale blue. So they just keep our white extra fresh. That's what they do. Oops, I've got some violet here by accident. Let's come back to cobalt blue. Where some of my lines are a bit more mucky, or some of the browns might be too roughly edged. If they're again working for you, fantastic. If that's a time when you can tidy them up, take that opportunity to work with the fresher shapes. Maybe a couple of white strokes, taking the buildings a little bit more further to the foreground on the bottom right corner. Just put a few white dabs on some of my pinks here, or around some of these pinks, just to show some of the buildings continues. They just maybe a bit more lower in the valley, a little bit more lower, or bring some of those lines a little bit more further into the shadows. Tiny bit more, and I'm stopping those little happy dots in white. Same as happy dots, down a bit more on the left. It makes it much more alive, much more moving, much more vibrant. Okay, last stroke of white, and I'm stopping. That's it. So loads of exciting bold colors today. Apologies for loads of reflections and change of angle. I'll try to photograph the work now to give you more of a true representation of it. But well done. So this is how we work from a bold, kind of a boring color photograph, and emphasizing the excitement from maybe an artist's work or style or approach we liked, how to translate it and bring it and excite the painting of our choice. So thank you so much for today, and I look forward to seeing your paintings when they're finished or when they're halfway through done.